13 residents are rescued. One of them is Max Crane. The following day, Max returned to his flat to see firsthand the extent of the damage.
Just for the people who know Exton Square, where I live, this is how it looks like after the fire of yesterday. 3 o'clock. This is the stairs to our apartment. Beneath here, it started. This apartment, the living room.
It is a scene of utter devastation. A few hours earlier, there had been flames raging up from the floor below.
Here's the door. Oh, well, I don't see the door, I don't know where it is. But this is my room, or what's left of my room.
Max had been fast asleep when the fire started. He was woken by a noise just outside his flat. He ran out of his bedroom and opened the front door, only to be met by a wall of thick black smoke.
At that moment I open it and then black smoke hits my face and I shut the door. I yell, "Fire, fire!" and I woke up the flatmates.
With the main staircase engulfed in flames, Max and his 4 flatmates were trapped. With the fire getting more intense by the minute, they retreated to the room furthest away from the flames.
When I saw the flames coming, I already knew our only exit was the general staircase. And that was really with thick black smoke. So that was not the place where we could exit it. And at that moment, you start looking for exit routes, and there are none. There's no exit route. And smoke is building up in the flat, so the smoke is going up. And at some point, it was just pitch black. You couldn't see anything, you had to crawl over the floor.
The flames were starting to burn through the floorboards.
You can see through the ceiling. You can look into the other apartment. Everything was black, so you couldn't see even 10 centimeters in front of your eyes. This is what's left of the bathroom.
With the flames beating at the front door and the flat filling with smoke, Max and his flatmates had to act fast. They grabbed some towels, soaked them under the tap and put them over their faces to prevent them being overcome by smoke and fumes.
In the room we had a little tap, wet the towels, put it in front of her face. I took my girlfriend and we ran to the living room, just black smoke.
They headed to the window, gasping for air, and pulled it open.
We're here with the 5 of us with these towels in front of our face. And the smoke was coming up from downstairs and from behind us, so we couldn't really, we had this little window for the first 5 of us.
With the main stairway blocked, the only way out was through this 3rd floor window.
And at that moment you look downstairs and you see, okay, 7 to 9 meters drop. You know, we can jump here. Like at that moment you're so full of adrenaline that you just feel you can do everything. And you say, you know, survival, I will make sure to make it.
Just as Max and his flatmates were about to jump, they were lowered to safety by firefighters. It was a lucky escape for all of them.
It was a very close call, and it's not a, how do you say, it's not a nice thing to look back on as an experience.
Later,
Just be careful when you're coming up.
as an investigation to the cause of the fire gets underway, our defenders discover that the block of flats was a death trap.
Yeah, and no smoke detectors. No.
Really serious.
X Factor, the jewel in the crown of ITV's primetime schedule. Glitz, glamour, and of course, the X Factor battle buses. Some of which were provided by luxury coach company Symphony Coaches Limited, and this man, director Alan J. Akuma. But J. Akuma had a dirty secret. Another of his companies, Symphony Chauffeurs Limited, was pouring raw sewage down the drain. This is the River Crane. Just 8.5 miles long, it's home to marsh frogs and water voles, and runs through a local nature reserve near Twickenham, West London, before joining the River Thames. Matthew Reed, an officer from the Environment Agency, is one of our defenders. It's his job to keep rivers like this clean.
We're here to protect the people and the environment, and we're here to investigate, and where people are doing things to pollute the environment and to spoil the enjoyment of the rivers for people, then we will investigate and we will track them down.
This river is treasured by the local community.
We use the rivers recreationally, people fish the rivers. There's an economic value in rivers. There's communities that rely on the resources that they provide, recreationally and for life.
The Environment Agency has monitors set up at regular intervals along this stretch of water to measure pollution levels and ensure it's kept clean. One chemical they're looking for is ammonia. If the levels are high, Matthew and the team are alerted.
If the ammonia level, which is a chemical which is indicative with the likes of sewage and effluent, if that increases, it will trigger an alarm. And that's how we were first made aware that there was an issue.
Our enforcement officers will be looking for evidence of where the pollution has come from. They'll be looking for evidence of the impacts of that pollution. They may be taking water samples, they may be taking witness statements. They will be trying to compile a full picture of what has happened.
To find out why the abnormal ammonia readings were so high, Matthew came down to the river. It was immediately clear there was a major problem.
We saw a lot of discoloration in the watercourse. It was blanketed with what we call sewage fungus, which is a type of fungus which grows in the river when you've got highly organic material.
With raw sewage causing serious damage to the river, Matthew began an investigation to try and find out where it was coming from and who was responsible. The team started to follow a trail of sewage back up the watercourse, using mobile testing apparatus to measure the pollutants as they went along.
The equipment that we use, the YSI meters, which we have handheld meters which we use in the field, allow us to look at the water quality in the river instantaneously. And from that information we can build up a picture which tells us exactly what that watercourse is looking like, how healthy it is, and also what type of pollution might be present.
Matthew and the team did a meticulous search of the river, taking detailed readings as they followed the trail of pollution.
We literally then get our boots dirty and we walk the river using the handheld bits of equipment. Then we're able to determine exactly where it is and pinpoint it.
It was a slow and painstaking process. Readings were taken every few meters. Step by step, they followed the pollution back to an inlet where rainwater entered the river. Then, they traced that to a drain on a coach park on an industrial estate near Heathrow Airport. That coach park and the drain they thought the pollution was coming from was used exclusively by Symphony Chauffeurs Limited. It looked like this was the company responsible for polluting the River Crane. Coming up, we'll hear how the man whose company provided some of the X Factor battle buses is called to account. Earlier, we heard how Max Crane and his flatmates escaped from a devastating fire at their home.
There's no exit route, and smoke is building up in the flat, so the smoke is going up, and at some point it was just pitch black. You couldn't see anything, you had to crawl over the floor.
8 fire engines and around 60 firefighters were called to the blaze. It took them 2 hours to bring it under control. 13 residents were rescued.
Just be careful when you come up.
Firefighters accompanied Max when he returned to his burnt-out flat the following day to collect whatever possessions he could salvage.
This is my room, or what's left of my room.
Fire investigators were shocked to discover there were no smoke alarms, and that Max had only woken when he heard a noise outside his flat.
This flat's a 5-bedroom.
Yeah, and no smoke detectors.
No smoke alarm.
No.
I mean, this is really serious.
The London Fire Brigade launched a thorough investigation into the blaze. When they looked into the safety management of the block, what they discovered was shocking. There was not one single fire alarm in the whole block of flats. If Max hadn't woken up when he did, he would have died. Dan Daly, the Assistant Commissioner for Fire Safety, was involved in the case.
One of the things that our inspectors found when they reviewed the building is that there was no alarm throughout the building, either in the common parts or within the rooms occupied by residents. That clearly presents a real risk to residents in terms of alerting them as early as possible to the presence of a fire, which will then enable them to make good their escape.
The complete absence of fire alarms was not the only danger. The fire doors were inadequate.
The fire doors were not up to standard we'd expect. That would have aided the fire to spread from one room to another and to affect the common parts through which people might be required to escape.
With this damning evidence, the London Fire Brigade prosecuted. In May 2017, the landlord of the block of flats along with the management company were found guilty of 3 fire safety offences. They were fined a record £250,000 with an additional £50,000 in costs.
You think things will never happen to you. You see it on TV, you see it in the movies, but you think never a fire or something damaging will happen to you.
In his summing up, the judge said the landlord and the management company showed utter contempt for the safety of their tenants.
I think we can say that the judge's comments that this was an accident waiting to happen would be fully supported by the serious nature of the offences and the fact that we took a decision to prosecute the landlord in this case.
All landlords are legally obliged to comply with strict fire safety regulations, and having smoke alarms on each floor is a legal requirement throughout the UK.
What we'd like to see is a real proactive approach from landlords and other people responsible for buildings to manage their buildings safely. Failings of this nature are unacceptable.
Later, we're with housing officers from Brent Council as they inspect other privately rented properties.
Morning, we're from Brent Council. We've come to do an inspection of this property. We understand.
And discover a potential death trap.
Any fire safety? No. No fire safety. Nothing to do with fire safety whatsoever.
In Hounslow, Middlesex, our defender Matthew Reid told us how he traced raw sewage in the River Crane back to a drain on a coach park near Heathrow Airport.
We saw a lot of discoloration in the watercourse. It was blanketed with what we call sewage fungus, which is a type of fungus which grows in the river when you've got highly organic material.
Matthew was determined to find the culprit, and Symphony Chauffeurs Limited, run by this man, Alan J. Akuma, was the prime suspect. It looked like Symphony Chauffeurs Limited was dumping raw sewage from the onboard chemical toilets down the drain and straight into the river.
It will literally drop out the bottom of the coach and into the drains.
And that's illegal.
We have seen stretches of river where everything has been killed, and they will take months and years to recover. These are not open sewers. They are living, breathing organisms, and we need to treat them as such and value them as such.
Tests were carried out on the drain, and they found evidence of chemical toilet waste identical to that found in the river.
With this type of pollution is maybe some rags, some sanitary material, and obviously with the chemical toilet waste, what you would have seen is a blue discoloration of the top of the drainage lid as well.
Having traced the pollution back to Symphony Chauffeurs Limited, Matthew was determined to call them to account. In order to do that, he needed to build a case that would stand up in court. He needed to establish a clear link between the drain and the pollution in the river. For this, Matthew used a fluorescent dye.
Once we'd popped a bit of the fluorescein dye in, what we'd do is we'd then pump water down through the drains, and that water will carry that dye along through the drainage system and out in the river. If I just put a small amount of water on here, you'll see exactly how it changes colour and what colour it goes. And that's exactly what we'll see in the river.
Matthew knew that if the dye travelled down the watercourse and ended up in the stretch of the river where the raw sewage was found, that would demonstrate that the pollution was coming from that drain. Sure enough, the exact spot where the pollution had been found turned green.
The purpose of the dye is to then prove the connection between the site and the river. This is the kind of evidence they'll be looking at to prove that it was this business that actually committed the offence. The dye is completely harmless. It doesn't have any impact on the river. All it allows us to do is trace the pollution back. It looks obviously fairly vivid, but that's what we want, that's what we need to see, and that's how we ultimately prove the connection.
This dye provided all the evidence Matthew and the team needed in order to take Symphony Chauffeurs Limited to court. The director, Alan J. Akuma, had been warned by the landlords and the Environment Agency not to abuse the drainage systems on at least 8 occasions, but each time he'd ignored them.
We'd been on site, we'd told them various times, we'd issued them with notices for information, and still they didn't stop. They didn't get the message that it wasn't acceptable.
Symphony Chauffeurs Limited knew what they were doing was illegal, yet they chose to continue.
We give everybody a chance. We don't just prosecute companies. We will look at all the circumstances of a case and weigh it all up. Attitude is a big consideration, so how well they cooperate with us. And in this case, we had no cooperation whatsoever.
On December the 4th, 2017, Symphony Chauffeurs Limited was ordered to pay more than £30,000 in fines and costs.
If somebody's done something deliberately and gone about polluting the environment on purpose for financial gain or just because they don't give a damn, it's those kind of individuals and those kind of companies that we need to be thinking about sending a clear message to and potentially prosecuting.
For Matthew, his work as a defender is not only a job, but a lifelong passion.
It was heartbreaking to see pollution, fish in distress, and the rivers being impacted.
The actions of Symphony Chauffeurs Limited had a devastating impact, but thanks to Matthew and the team, the river is now on the mend.
It's been just over a year now since the pollution actually stopped, and coming along here today, it's clear that there's been a massive improvement. There's nothing now, the riverbed looks great. I've seen little fish and minnows bobbing around. It looks fantastic.
We heard earlier how Max Crayon and his flatmates nearly died in a devastating fire at their home.
This flat's 5 bedrooms in this flat.
Yeah, and no smoke detectors.
There's no smoke alarm.
No.
I mean, this is really serious. It's scratch.
And how fire investigators fined their landlord and management company a record £250,000 for failing to provide basic fire safety precautions. 6:10 in the morning. We're out with our defender, Herb McGowan, Brent Council's enforcement manager. He's about to carry out an unannounced inspection at a 2-bedroom bungalow that he suspects has been converted into an unlicensed house of multiple occupation, or HMO. He wants to check that it meets minimum safety standards and that the tenants are not living in dangerous conditions.
Morning, we're from Brent Council. We've come to do an inspection of this property.
The hope is, by arriving this early, he will see for himself how many people are living in this 2-bedroom property.
Yep. Morning.
Good morning.
There are 2 double mattresses in the first room they enter.
How many bedrooms have we got here?
Herb walks around the property in order to establish the layout and find out what facilities the tenants have.
So we've got another living space there.
Legally, in an HMO, there should be no more than 5 tenants sharing a bathroom. But it looks like there are a lot more than that in this house.
Is that the bathroom? So that's the only bathroom, so you've all got to wait until the person's finished to use it? Everyone? No other bathrooms in the house?
Herb needs to check the whole of the property, both inside and out.
So can I quickly go through? Sorry.
When trying to work out how many people are living in a property, one of the things Herb looks for is a shoe rack.
This is unbelievable.
The more shoes in the rack, the more people in the house. Herb checks the shed in case one of the tenants is hiding in there.
So there's a side access.
Just before Herb went into the garden, 2 of the tenants had run off.
Some of the gentlemen have gone through the side, probably thinking that we're the enemy rather than being here to help.
This property is overcrowded, and it's the landlord who's responsible. Herb goes from room to room and does a head count of the people living there.
So the fella that's run off, then you've got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6.
There are beds crammed into every room.
8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13. Okay.
With the 2 tenants that have run off, that comes to a total of 15.
Run off.
With so many people crammed into this 2-bedroom bungalow, Herb's worried about their welfare.
Any fire safety? No. No fire safety. No, nothing to do with fire safety whatsoever.
A 2-bedroom bungalow, basically, isn't it?
Yeah.
15 guys living.
Spencer Randolph is head of private housing services for Brent Council. He's shocked by the conditions here.
There are no fire doors, no self-closing doors, no fire protection system, not even any smoke alarms in the property. So it's a real risk for the occupants.
There's a minimum of 15 young men living here in conditions where there's 1 set of bathroom facilities, cooking facilities, no fire safety, obviously chronic overcrowding, and we've clearly got to find out who's behind all of this.
Some of the houses that environmental health officers go into are death traps. There are loose wiring around, there's no fire safety measures, although there are they go out and they advise and they make recommendations and they support and try and work with the landlords. Certain landlords don't want to know.
These tenants are subletting the property from a couple who live in Romania. With the help of translators, they try to work out how much they pay in rent and to whom.
This person is Romanian and he is currently in Romania. And this
So who are they paying their rent to?
Cui plătiți chirie
To this people?
Acestor oameni cui plătiți chirie?
According to this tenant, somebody comes round to collect the weekly rent on behalf of the couple in Romania.
From the information that we've received so far from the guys, they're paying around about £50 a week each. So what's that, about £780, £800 a week rent coming in and going to somebody here. That's all the information we've got so far anyway. So.
That means the couple who are subletting this property are raking in up to £3,250 a month for this 2-bedroom bungalow. That's an annual income of £39,000.
39,000?
Herb has visited hundreds of HMOs, but even he is shocked by the amount the landlord is making on this property.
Somebody's making a lot of money over it, aren't they?
Yeah, but you'd have thought people would have got the message, you can't do this, you can't... No, this is crazy.
Brent Council is planning to take legal action against the landlord and subletting tenant. Terry Grazier is a classic car enthusiast from Telford in the West Midlands. In his spare time, Terry likes to tinker with his car collection. He has an impressive fleet.
Got the Porsche 944, which is a classic 80s Porsche. The Ford Granada, the Opel Manta, which I've got, was trying to sell it to somebody else, so I bought that as well. We bought the Ford Fairlane instead off a lovely person in Hereford. So at the moment I've got 1, 2, 3, 4. Oh, and I've got what they call a tuk-tuk as well.
Terry buys old cars and restores them to their former glory.
I would say at least 3 weekends out of every 4 I'm tinkering with some old vehicle of some description. Yeah, I just love it. That's my hobby.
Over the years, Terry has bought and sold hundreds of cars, usually online. But there's one car dealer he won't forget in a hurry. This man, Gerry Meakin, a serial fraudster from Scotland. Terry had always regretted selling his 1970s Ford Fairmont. In August 2017, he was planning to get married and had set his heart on buying back the car for the big day. Terry set about trying to track it down and put several postings out on social media asking if anyone recognised it. The following day, Terry was delighted to get a response from someone claiming to be the owner of the car he wanted back.
I was over the moon. I thought I can't believe this free advert on social media has worked. Looks like I've found the vehicle.
The owner of the car was keen to talk to Terry.
I received another text message from this same number. Would it be possible to call you? So I answered him back, yeah, of course, call me. So this person called me and said, basically, my name's Jordan Fleming.
Jordan Fleming was actually Gerry Meakin, a serial con man who has served several jail terms for fraud. Gerry Meakin used a variety of false names. Jordan Fleming was just one of them. He told Terry the car was his if he wanted it.
I was absolutely over the moon. I couldn't wait if you want the truth, I couldn't wait to send the deposit. I think my heart took over, really.
It's really difficult when people are emotionally invested in something. It's something that leaves you more vulnerable to being scammed.
They settled on a price of £4,900 for the car. The plan was for Terry to fly up to Edinburgh that weekend and drive the car back down to Telford. Desperate for the car, Terry agreed to pay a deposit of £2,000.
And I thought, that's quite a big deposit, but okay, I'm going to get the car back. So we went onto the internet and we transferred him £500 there and then. I said, right, we'll transfer you 500 this evening, and I'll tell you what, as a gesture of good faith, I'll send you another 1,500 in the morning. So that's £2,000 you've had. So I think the heartstrings was pulled, and I think the excitement took over that I'd actually found it. And I think that's what kind of, oh, it'll be all right, I'll pay the money, it'll be all right.
The following day, Gerry Meakin called Terry to ask for the outstanding balance, £2,900. He claimed that someone else had offered to pay the full amount for the car there and then. The first of many lies.
Scammers are ruthless. They will do what they can, do whatever it takes to get parting people from their money, and they will go after people continually and harass them and harangue them to get as much money as they can.
Meakin was pressurising Terry, but despite being desperate for the car, Terry was cautious and asked to meet.
So I said, well, I'm not going to just send you another £2,900. All I've basically got is a bank account number, a telephone number, and a voice at the end of the phone. So, you know, if you want the other £2,900 today, you're going to have to meet me somewhere.
Meakin said he was in London for business, so he arranged to stop off in the Telford area on his way back up to Scotland. That way, they could meet in person and Terry could pay the outstanding balance on the car.
We met up on this car park near Stafford, and he seemed pleasant enough, you know, no problem.
The man they met, who they knew as Jordan Fleming, was very amicable. However, Terry's fiancée took this photo so they had a record of the meeting.
And my missus said, well, look, you could be anybody, so can we take a picture of you to get... Yeah, you take a picture. But as she went to take the picture, he put his sunglasses on to try and cover his face, we found out now. So we took the picture, everything was pleasant. He signed a receipt, give him the other £2,900, and off we went.
It was a done deal. Terry had paid con man Gerry Meakin the full £4,900 for the car. The plan was for Terry to fly to Edinburgh a week later to collect it and drive it back down to Telford. Before travelling up to Scotland, Terry thought he'd checked the car's MOT on the DVLA website. He was alarmed to discover that it didn't have one.
So I thought, well, how am I going to drive it back then? So I rang him up and said, it clearly states that that car's got no MOT. You said it was on the road. He says, oh, no, it's not on that registration now. It's on another registration. And then, to be honest, it was 101 excuses after that.
Later, our defenders are on the trail of Jerry Meakin in one of their most challenging investigations to date.
The investigation was a very complex process because of all of the different aliases used by Mr. Meakin and the different business names.
Morning, we're from Brent Council. We've
In
come
Brent,
to do an inspection
our
of this
defenders
property.
Herb McGowan and Spencer Randolph
Morning. Good morning.
discovered 15 tenants living in a two-bedroom bungalow.
Any fire safety? No. No fire safety. No, nothing to do with fire safety whatsoever.
Now they're inspecting another house of multiple occupation, or HMO, which they suspect is also unlicensed and unsafe.
So one person collects the rent and then passes it on to the... We need to make sure that there's adequate fire safety and amenities for the tenants in the property.
This is a 5-bedroomed house with 2 adults in each room, sharing 1 kitchen and 1 bathroom.
Sorry, ma'am, you've got children upstairs, yeah? How many children?
Herb learns that there are also 2 children living here. It's crucial that the house meets adequate safety regulations.
It's an unlicensed house in multiple occupation, and as such, we need to regulate these types of properties, particularly bearing in mind that we have children here, which kind of increases the risk of something potentially going wrong in a big way.
The kitchen's not big enough for the 12 people living here, so 3 large fridges have been placed in the hallway.
We can see the problem of having 5 households in one property where you come in the front door and you've got 3 fridges right in the middle there of the common parts. It's not ideal, certainly.
Spencer is concerned about the fridges obstructing the main exit route should there be a fire.
Blocks a means of escape, doesn't it? Particularly if one of these was to catch fire. Tenants aren't going to be able to get down and get out of the house.
Yeah.
With the fridges being a serious fire hazard, Herb tries to find working smoke alarms.
Who took off the smoke alarm in the hallway there? Or has that always been off?
I don't know.
There's just the base of it, but there's nothing else there.
Spencer is concerned about the lack of fire doors.
But yeah, you can tell that's not a fire door, just the way it bends. That is, well, that's solid anyway.
Now that they have discovered that the property does not comply with HMO licensing regulations, Spencer and the team will be taking action.
The landlord or agent that are letting that property out are actually breaking the law. And the tenants are, in a way, being exploited. They're paying a market rent for that property, and they're living in really unsafe conditions.
With over 36,000 privately rented properties in Brent, it's Herb's job to protect the people who live in them.
We need to continue to get that message out there that landlords have responsibilities and tenants have rights.
Earlier, we heard how classic car collector Terry Grazier went online to track down this rare Ford Fairmont he desperately wanted for his upcoming wedding. Terry was delighted when Jordan Fleming got in touch, saying he had the car.
I was absolutely over the moon. I couldn't wait if you want the truth, I couldn't wait to send the deposit.
What Terry didn't realise was that Jordan Fleming was actually serial con man Jerry Meakin. Terry paid the full £4,900 for the car and arranged to collect it that following weekend. However, alarm bells started ringing when he found out the car didn't have an MOT.
So that car's got no MOT. You said it was on the road. He says, oh no, it's not on that registration now, it's on another registration. And then, to be honest, it was 101 excuses after that.
The excuses became increasingly outlandish, and Terry quickly realised he'd been scammed.
Suddenly the car is in a garage 2 hours away from where he lives, at this MOT station. Why would it be 2 hours away, to start with? And cut a very long story short, this went on for 4 weeks. Excuse after excuse after excuse.
Terry gave up on ever getting his dream car. He wanted his money back.
I said, Jordan, that's it, I've had enough. I just want you to send me money back. I've clearly had enough. You've cost me over £5,000 for this car, plus flights, and you know, there's no sign of the car. And he said, well, I'll give you half your money back, but I'm not giving it all.
By now, desperate, Terry threatened to call the police. He sent him one last text. The response he got from Jordan Fleming was chilling.
I said, look, if that money's not in my bank account within an hour, I'm reporting you for fraudulent theft. And at that point, which was the final text message and the final point of contact, he just kind of like, ha, 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 do what you want. And that was never heard from him again.
Terry reported the crime to his local police force, who passed it on to their colleagues in Scotland. What Terry didn't realise was that Jerry Meakin was already the subject of a joint investigation by police and trading standards. This is Sandra Harkness. It's her job to protect consumers from con men like Meakin. Sandra and her team were already on Meakin's trail. They were investigating 20 complaints from victims around the UK.
Officers visited the consumers who had complained to take statements. Firstly, who it was they had dealt with, what was the business name, and a description of the individual, how they had become connected with that trader, and in most cases it was through social media.
On each occasion, Meakin would use the same technique. He had multiple accounts in different names on social media sites. He would target his victims and start engaging with them.
Meakin was registered on a number of social media groups where he offered the services that he was able to provide in the home improvement and car repair services, and also he would sometimes respond to other people's requests for help if they needed a mechanic or some home improvements done.
Once Meakin had gained the trust of his unsuspecting victims online, he would often pay them a visit in their own home.
He would look at the work, agree a deposit to be paid with the customer, which they duly paid, normally there and then.
Lured in by his patter, Meakin's victims would pay the fraudster cash up front, but he would then disappear with their money. Most of them never saw him again.
As well as losing the money, being the victim of this sort of crime causes a lot of stress, because each of them had to try to contact Meakin to see why he hadn't come back to do the job that he said he would do.
Linking Meakin to all the complaints was a complex process, as he used a host of false names and ran several bogus companies.
Meakin tried to avoid detection by attempting to be sophisticated in his methods. The number of different aliases that he used and the number of different business names that he used did make it difficult to detect and investigate these crimes.
In order to prove that it was him who had committed all the offences, Sandra Harkness and the team had to link all these different names and companies back to Jerry Meakin.
Evidence like this is absolutely essential when building a case. Not only do we need to prove that an offence has been committed, it's also vital to prove that the accused is the person who committed it. So whilst we had a lot of evidence about a number of different offences, we needed to tie them all back to the one individual who was going to be the accused, in this case Jerry Meakin.
After months of painstaking investigation, Sandra and the team finally had the evidence they needed. Meakin was arrested and taken away for questioning. On the 24th of May 2018, Jerry